Hi guys, so I've decided to make an injury prevention and treatment video because I've had quite a few inquiries from you guys. For example, Pavlin Dimitrov asks, could you share some exercises you use to help recover from your shoulder injury and more info on what exactly the injury was? To assist in running us through some of the common injuries a gymnast or other athlete may face, I've got John, who you may recognize from my Tough Mudder Obstacles video, the Spartan Race video, or the Stampede video. Now John's a physio, so he has a lot of experience in this area.
How are you, Matt?
Hey John, good to see you again.
Alright, what are we doing today?
So today I was just hoping you could explain to my fans out there some of the common injuries people may experience and maybe run us through some exercises that can help in the recovery and other ways maybe you can prevent these injuries.
Alright, sounds good. Let's get to it.
To start off with, we'll go through the injury that I was most currently experiencing.
A couple of months ago, Matt came to me and said that his shoulder had been slowing him down from his rings training a bit. He had a bit of pain in the back of his shoulder and wasn't really sure what to do. I did an assessment with Matt and diagnosed him with an infraspinatus impingement syndrome. Now, it's not really that common. You tend to see it more in throwing athletes or gymnasts. So, Matt, if you will, shirt off. Let's give everyone an idea of what was happening. Alright, spin around for me. Okay, so the infraspinatus muscle, which Matt injured, travels from the outside of the arm bone right underneath the spine of the scapula there. And its main movement is to make your arm do that. Now, if you can imagine, therefore, that this line of tape indicates the line that the muscle travels, like that. Okay, Matt, lift your arm way overhead for me. Now you can see how it now forms a curved shape. What happens is if you've got the point where the muscle starts and the muscle finishes, but a big bone from your shoulder blade in the middle, when the arm gets lifted up, the muscle actually gets pinched on this point here. Now normally that's not a problem, but if you have a lot of force going through your arm, such as with a rings exercise, then there's going to be a lot of pressure pulling that muscle into the bone. Now, as you know, Matt trains really hard, so doing that again and again and again led to him developing quite a strong inflammation through that tendon there.
Alright John, so what sort of treatment or other techniques can we do to treat that shoulder?
Three things. We have to A, make that tendon stronger, B, make the whole shoulder more flexible, and C, make sure you're not actually hurting the shoulder while we're rehabilitating it. So, step one, let's look at the strengthening for your shoulder. So Matt, because this muscle here makes your arm do that movement, you have to strengthen it in that exact movement. Now, if you're doing it overhead and you're strengthening it in that fashion, then that's going to pinch it up here. So you've got to make sure that whenever you're doing that exercise, that muscle's staying straight and safe away from that shoulder blade. So one of the best physio exercises we do for this, we call it a resisted external rotation. The first exercise I had Matt doing for strengthening was to take a band across his body gently with a good posture and slowly back in. The emphasis for this one has to be slow, so you get a good muscle contraction the whole way through. After you've got the hang of this one, the next thing to do is to do it with your elbow slightly elevated, but making sure you keep your shoulder blades back and you maintain a good posture as it comes across your body. The purpose of this exercise here is to stabilize your shoulder blade whilst performing the resisted external rotation movement that we just covered with the stretchy band. Okay, so now we've addressed the strength and the coordination of your shoulder, we need to look at good ways to make sure that muscle maintains its flexibility. So there's one good stretch for this. It's called the posterior capsule release, where you simply grab your arm across your body and make sure it's relaxed down, and you just pull it across until you feel a stretch right underneath that spot where it was sore. When you pull it across, that does get a proper stretch on it. Now when it comes to actually preventing it from flaring up and allowing it to rehabilitate properly, what we have to avoid is exercises where you put a lot of force into that area and into that muscle pulling back through here. Now I can think of 3 examples that would be a bad idea. A front lever is one. A ring pull-up when you're actually pulling it down past your chest would be another, because it causes a huge rotational force around your shoulder. And of course, anything where you're pulling forwards on the rings. When you're actually pushing your shoulder blades around and rounding off your back, puts a lot more stress to that as well. So while Matt was recovering from this injury, I had him avoiding those 3 things as he was doing my exercises, and now he's doing a lot better.
So John, what's another common injury a gymnast or athlete may experience?
For gymnasts, number one injury is called a supraspinatus tendonitis. Now it's hard to show on a human model, so we've got a little skeletal model here. So this is a shoulder from behind, where you can see shoulder blade, arm bone, and the collarbone at the top. Now, when the arm moves up past about 90 degrees, the space between the arm bone and the shoulder blade gets really small, which is why when Matt spins around and lifts his arm, and all the way up, you see the shoulder blade starting to rise above 90 degrees. Now, because there's a lot of force going through your shoulders in this pinched up position here, it's very common to get this little tendon caught between the two bones.
Alright John, so what's the best way to treat supraspinatus tendonitis?
Number one, avoid doing that. It might sound a bit counterintuitive because that's the motion you're trying to get back, but every time you lift your arm up, it is going to pinch that inflamed tendon and make it worse.
Okay.
So you have to make sure when you're doing any strength exercises, you're keeping your arms below 90 degrees and you make sure you have a good posture while you do them. That's the number one way to help this injury.
Okay.
Other ways you can do it, of course, strengthening out your rotator cuff in a similar fashion to how we've already addressed, maintaining flexibility exactly the same stretch, and of course avoiding the things that was stirring it up.
Okay.
So Matt, as you know, your biceps muscle has two components, an inside and an outside bit that makes up the main muscle. Now, for gymnasts, it's very, very common to get what you call a long head of biceps irritation, where the outside part of the biceps muscle, as it goes over the top of your arm bone, gets pinched in the groove that it actually sits in. Now, this is really, really common because gymnasts require a lot of flexibility in that direction. Now, if you imagine your biceps attaching to the front, every time this arm goes back, it puts a huge amount of force jamming it into this groove. To fix a long head of biceps irritation, again, number one advice, stop doing the stuff that hurts. The second most important thing when addressing a long head of biceps irritation is, of course, rehabilitation exercises. So, with this muscle that comes down through there, what you want to make sure is you're not overstretching it way back and you're not bunching it way up. So, to avoid those two movements and to actually include an exercise based on that full range are the best ways to treat, as Matt will demonstrate now. My favourite rehab exercise for a long head of biceps irritation is taking it up to the full height with the arm that's not injured and lowering it down slowly with the arm that is injured. If you keep a good posture the whole time, then that can help strengthen up and rehabilitate that long head of biceps.
So John, what else do you have in store for us now?
Most of us have probably heard of a shoulder dislocation in the past. Very, very common in rings gymnasts. I'm sure if you YouTubed it, you could come up with a few hits. Hopefully Matt won't be one of them.
Definitely.
The most common movement which causes a dislocation is when the arm rotates all the way out and gets brought back like this. So if you can imagine during your rings workout, if your hand gets caught in a ring and your body goes forwards on it, it's very likely for you to pop your shoulder out of its socket. So how do you treat this? Step one, go to hospital. Don't try and put it back in yourself. It's not safe and you can risk damaging all those rotator cuff tendons that Matt and I have just been rehabilitating. Step two, if the shoulder's relocated itself or you've had it located at hospital and it's starting to improve, you want to get stuck into your rotator cuff strengthening exercises. We've already looked at some shoulder stability. We've already done some strengthening through your rotator cuff. See a physiotherapist to get a few more, because there's a lot of exercises that you'll need to do to make sure your shoulder becomes stable again, especially if you want to keep doing rings exercises.
Have you got any other common injuries for us then?
As some of you may be aware, the most dangerous part of your rings workout is actually getting off the rings.
The dismount.
The dismount. If you hit the ground too hard, or if you do it too frequently, you can develop stress fractures in your foot, which will sideline you for anything from 6 weeks to 6 months. If you end up with one of these stress fractures in the foot, you'll need to be in a boot and on crutches to start with, and then a few months later, you can get rid of the crutches, and then a few months after that, you can get rid of the boot. So unless you want to train rings with crutches and a boot, watch your feet.
Well, that was all extremely informative and very helpful. I think there's a lot of valuable advice in that can really help us prevent injuries in our training and also help us treat them as well. And I'd really like to thank John for taking the time out of his morning to help us with this.
You're welcome, Matt. Moral of the story, guys, if anything hurts and you're not sure, go see a physiotherapist and get a proper diagnosis.
Yep. So that's it for today. Remember, train hard but safe and stay strong. I hope you found that as useful as I did. Have a look at the month 12 progress video on the left for a crazy rope climb and that turtleneck. And to see how I do in my goal session, check out the video on the right. Remember, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at @TheMattWalker with 3 T's. Train hard and stay strong. Why didn't I seek advice earlier?